I am really excited about our guest today because he is a good friend and a fellow musical troubadour. I am happy to introduce you to Bradford Loomis, who is a powerhouse of vocal cords and an impressively well-spoken songwriter. He's based out of the Pacific Northwest, which is how I first got to know him. So rather than doing the usual, tell me about your new album kind of interview, I took the opportunity today to ask Bradford some really hard questions about his career. He, in turn, asked me a whammy of a question, too, and my answer really took me by surprise. You'll have to just listen to the episode to discover what my answer was, and also what the question is. Believe me, it's juicy. Bradford and I discussed today how to turn the mundane into meaningful, how we can carve our careers to fit our lifestyle, and because I'm really stoked about his new album, I really am, we do get into the backstory of his album, which involves strong ties to his father, who was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. I hope you get as much out of knowing Bradford Loomis as I have. Let's get on into it. You're listening to Bare Naked Bravery, a weekly podcast hosted by me, Emily Ann Peterson. As a singer-songwriter, author, teaching artist, and creative entrepreneur, I encounter some really fascinating stories. I'm on a mission to reveal the depth and width of bravery and its benefits to creatives like yourself. More than ever today, our world needs bravery, unique bravery, from everyone. This is the place where you find it. There is no script or censorship today because that's how these facets of bare naked bravery are in real life. So if you're listening with little ears nearby, please know that some episodes may contain mature language and subject matter. One of the easiest ways you can share bravery with the world is to send this episode to a friend or two. Send them an email, text, or tweet. Tag them in one of my Instagram posts. My handle is Emily Ann Pete. Or leave us a review on iTunes. It takes seconds and can be done from your phone right now. Again, we need more bravery in the world. So let's be brave together. Okay, Bradford, are you ready for some bare naked bravery?
Let's do it.
Let's get naked. You have a very large beard.
It's true.
This is part of your thing. You also have a pretty intense in-your-face voice.
Okay.
You do. I mean, we've played shows together, or a couple, and every time I'm sitting like in the wings, or even as an audience member, I'm always just blown away.
Oh.
Every time. Yeah, no, I am. It's like, oh my God, where does that come from? So give us a little bit of background about what brought you to where you're at right now as a musician, singer-songwriter, and touring artist.
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I knew pretty early on that I wanted to do music. I think I had no idea as to the scope of that when you're young. I think it's really easy to imagine that in the most romantic way possible. So I think that when I was a kid, I dreamed I would be a professional musician and rock star and, that whole,
Did you have a moment? Because I know I had a moment where I realized, oh, it's possible.
Well, I mean, kind of. Not in relation to that, because my expectations have changed so drastically. Not just my expectations, like what I actually desire has changed so drastically. As I've gotten older, and, I went through high school doing all the music classes I could possibly take and all of that sort of thing. I was in every choir. I loved it, but once I got out of high school, I had no idea what to do with it. I hated school, so I didn't feel like I could go to college and, get a degree that would be helpful. So I just kind of floundered around. Well, once I got back into music after many years not doing music, that really changed my expectations as far as what I wanted. I wanted to just be able to play music and not worry about finances. So in that sense, yes, I've definitely had a spot where, whoa, this is going to be real. Okay, it's pretty cool. And so the last 2 years, I've been full time for about 4 years now. And so the last 2 years, I've really made an effort of, as I'm driving around the country and in areas, places I never thought I'd be, taking consistent mental breaks to appreciate where we're at and what I'm doing.
It's so necessary because when you are out touring, it is go, 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 go. And you come home and you're completely exhausted. You don't have any time for appreciation. You don't have any strength for appreciation.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it's really easy to look back and be like, wait, what tour was that? Wherever, everything goes by so fast that it just becomes a blur in hindsight. So
how do you make each tour memorable or different from the other ones?
I try to, on every tour, book something. Well, there's two things. First is I try to, on every tour, book something that means more than music. For example, I went and played at a prison for some inmates on one tour. Another tour, I went and I played for a homeless camp outside of Modesto. These guys, consistent every week, they meet with a bunch of homeless, and it's not just homeless, but it incorporates that, and it's become this really cool thing. So I went and played with them and hung out with them. And on another tour, I went and played for this is kind of odd, but an Appalachian trailer park. There's a group of people that go to this trailer park, and these kids, Appalachian poverty is a whole other thing.
My family comes from it. I know. It's really fascinating.
It is. It totally is. It's not like anything I'd ever seen before, but they're consistent and they just love on these people and they immerse themselves in it. It's not just like a parachuting in rescuing type thing. So anyways, I try to do something like that every tour. That's one thing. And the other thing is I'm endeavoring to say yes. So when something comes up on a tour that might put me out a little bit, I just say yes. And I go and I try something new. And that's been really cool.
What have you done? What have you said yes to that you normally wouldn't have?
Okay, so I met a guy who was profusely inebriated at a show.
That's not a surprise.
Yes, and he offered to do some filming for us.
While he was drunk?
Yes.
Okay.
And so you're like, oh gosh, even going to remember this? And then, of course, you're like, how do I know that this isn't just some schlub who's going to show up with an iPhone and be like, hey, we're making a movie, So we just decided to do it. We're like, all right, let's give it a try. What could hurt? And it turns out he's a legit pro, and he showed up a little bit late, a little bit hungover, but he remembered. He was an awesome guy, and we made friends with him and another artist that was there, and we filmed a song together, and it was awesome.
One of the things, so I was in a band with my friend Curtis Ramju, and I always gave him a big hard time about like how sometimes, like, because I'm pretty driven, so sometimes this would bother me. He would take his sweet time with the people at the venue or afterwards, packing things up and everything. And I was like a newbie to the whole like scene, quote unquote scene. So one of the things I learned from him, which has been so valuable, is if you take the time to make the slow and intentional investments in relationships, it comes back like 100-fold.
Yeah.
And I still see him now, now all of us are doing different things and different projects, but all of us are still giving into the relationships and getting things out of the relationships that we invested in when we were taking things slow and doing things a little different.
Yeah, that makes sense. And something that starts too hot or it's too, everyone can tell when someone is talking to you because they want something.
Yep.
So it's much more real. It's got more chance for like being a real long relationship if you are intentional and slow about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're making the mundane meaningful. What else are you up to?
Well, as far as touring goes, the way that I tour is because I've got family at home, a wife and kids, that is specifically, I don't like to be gone very long. So I try to pack as much as I can in a small time frame. So I will generally have a show every single night. I try to keep the drives relatively short, not over 6 hours. That gives me some time to do something the next day. If that comes up, stop at a park or, Civil War site or something unusual if I see it. And then that way you're able to actually, because I don't want to have toured the country over and over again and not have any memories.
Like been in Cincinnati 3 times, but don't know anything about it.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to be able to stop places that are unique that I've heard about or, always wanted to see and be able to do that. So
One of the things I think you're really good at is, because I've seen this over the last 4 years plus, that you are really good at figuring out ways to make your career fit your life and not the other way around.
oh, nice.
I think partly that has to do with the fact that you love your kids, you love your wife, so you've got like the motive to do that. Whereas I don't think a lot of people, like myself, I'm single, I'm not dating anybody, I don't have kids, so like I don't have that same motive to make sure that my career fits my lifestyle. I don't have the fire under my ass, as they say. What have been some hiccups in that? Like learning how to fit your career into your lifestyle and not the other way around?
Well, honestly, I believe it's a little bit tough to be an American and approach life that way because so much of what we're told is follow the American dream. And we did that. We went and I got a real job and we bought a house. Stock market crashed, 2008, housing market, all that jazz. Lost the job, lost the house. So that really put us towards, the hustle, as my wife and I call it, where we were just trying to get by, trying to figure out how we were going to make ends meet, multiple jobs, both of us were passing the kids off. But we always said when we got married, we were really committed to each other and to the idea of commitment. And then we were also committed when we had babies on the way that one of us would always be home with them. And so that really made things a challenge when you're in the midst of the hustle. But we made it work. And so one of the ways we made it work was not so much because there's always about get more, so much of the American hustle is about get more. And we kind of reverse engineered that in a way. That was definitely a part of it. How can we make more money? But we also said, how can we pay less bills? And so we moved into a small little mother-in-law apartment. Our cars have been paid for, I don't know, 10 years, something like that. We don't have car payments. We haven't. I don't think we've had a car payment as long as we've been married.
That's impressive.
So we're very much, we don't have credit cards. We don't have debt. We very much keep our minimums as low as possible so that we can concentrate more on pursuing art and pursuing the hustle, but have the hustle be us, what we want to do with our art. And so my wife is a photographer, as you know, and a writer. And so she's helping a lot with her own endeavors artistically, but then also she's able to use her craft in my career and our record label together. And it's not just a record label. It's more of an artistic collective because it's going to help any artist who wants to endure to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, it's kind of like the new version of record label.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Because the old standard was that an artist would come to a record label as a one-stop shop to get their music out there. And it sounds like you guys are still doing that, but it's just not looking like the same thing that it always has in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. So that desire to work together using our different skill sets has been really helpful. And maybe that's a part of, because I definitely agree with what you said, that I do really try to match my career to my marriage and my lifestyle and our family rather than vice versa. And I think part of that is just that my wife and I have always been bought into each other and who we are as people. And with that comes along how we are gifted, what our skill sets are, and that sort of thing. And we've haven't always worked together. We're just getting into that phase of actually working directly together. But she's always been incredibly supportive. I couldn't do almost anything that I do without her. So,
Hi, Kim.
not here.
Yeah, I agree with you. She's great. I want to make sure that whenever I'm doing any sort of consulting with any of the creative entrepreneurs that I work with, we always start from personality type and lifestyle before we make any sort of strategy going forward. But what I've noticed is that when you start from that internal place, or that like taking account of the constraints and limitations that exist that you cannot control. Yeah. For some people, that's I have kids and I have commitments that I've made. For other people, it's, wow, I'm an introvert in an extroverted industry, whatever. So there's a whole bunch of, like, can unroll the whole long list of ways that your constraints that you can't control affect or change how your career moves forward. Mm-hmm. But what I've noticed is that anytime you come from that internal place, your career looks, first of all, your career looks different than everyone else's. And secondly, it might be an egg or a chicken situation, chicken or egg. But what ends up happening is your career gets access to things in your industry that other people don't have access to.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Have you noticed that in your career?
That is an interesting point. Yes, I have. I've noticed that both in mine, but a really good friend that I have, her name is Shannon Curtis. She didn't pioneer the house concert movement, but she's written a book about it. She's really refined its purposes for her. And I've been very moved by that and tried her model, and it works really, really well. And so I incorporated a lot of that into my career, but with my spin on it. I've noticed, for me, one of the biggest life-changing experiences I've had in music was playing at that prison. And that was such a unique experience because a person that was a fan of my music and has now become a really good friend was volunteering at a prison at the time and was able to get me in. And, that's a pretty unique scenario.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just seeing the doors open, I don't know, that's funny. That's, I 100% agree with what you say in that regard, because the uniqueness of the things that come your way when you've structured your career around your personality, around who you are, there's a uniqueness in that, but there's also an authenticity that I think people recognize and resonate with. Mm-hmm. So you're much more likely to get yourself into an experience that is unique to the relationships that you found. So yeah, that's been a really powerful experience for me. The things that I've found that are mm-hmm. unique that you don't see in your general how-to guides for being a musician.
Mm-hmm. For me, I've noticed, let's take this podcast, for instance. This conversation between you and I wouldn't get to have if I wasn't going about being a singer-songwriter in a really different, unique way.
Right.
And it's these kinds of conversations that I just get totally jazzed about, because that's what my I'm an INFJ. I'm an introvert. I intuit things. I like to feel things, and then I judge things. So it makes it really good. Like this medium or this, vehicle makes it really good for the work that I put out in the world. But I think when you can harness those superpowers that are in your personality or that are in your lifestyle, because even if your kids might end up becoming a superpower for your career at a later date, because maybe one of them gets really into Legos and they design your next stage design with Lego elements, and it's super cool and awesome and unique. And, like there's so many ways that if you allow the constraints to have a say, there's a lot of power and unique opportunities that you can take advantage of when you do that.
For sure.
One of the ways that I see you doing stuff differently is and this is just like a logistical difference that I see. A lot of artists will start in one corner of the US and then just drive all the way around and, like be on the road for forever. But because of your constraints for family and wanting to be around family, what you'll do is you'll fly out to, and correct me if I'm wrong, if this is incorrect, you just jump right in. Okay. You fly out to Cincinnati, say, rent a car, and then just drive around kind of like a spider web and just camp out in that general vicinity and then go back on the airport, fly home. Yeah.
You got it.
It's so smart.
Well, it makes the most of the time.
How come more people don't do that?
I don't know. That's a good question. For me, in the history of our family, I have been the stay-at-home parent probably about 60% of the time, maybe even 70% of the time. So I'm really attached to my kids. So about 2 weeks, 15, 16 days, and I start missing them like crazy. And there's kids everywhere. And so I can usually focus pretty good and get in the mode and be on for a tour. But once I start seeing kids, about that 15, 16 day, I start really missing my kids. My wife and I have tried something new. We got them dummy phones, like little smartphones. So they email me constantly now when I'm out on the road. And they're masters of the emoji. So
yes.
I get a lot of really ridiculously cute emails now from them. That's pretty awesome. That helped a lot on this last tour for them to be able to communicate with me directly. Because I communicate with my wife all day long when I'm out on the road. But being able to keep in touch with them has been important. So yeah, I definitely want to keep my tours as short and as impactful. You can't go too short because then you don't make enough money. So it's got to make enough money. It's got to be effective. So right now my wife works a little bit, but she's a stay-at-home mom where she stays home with me. And so she doesn't have like a, quote unquote 9-to-5 real job. She does some photography and some booking engagements and that sort of thing. But we pretty much live off music right now. And so my tours have to be effective, both in terms of cost, because there's a cost to everything, both in terms of financial cost, but then also the cost of being away from them.
Yeah. Do you notice something like, let's take that personality thing or like lifestyle constraints defining the way you show up in the world? Do you do anything like that in your concerts? I mean, I know I have my own list of things that I think are probably the answers, but I want you to answer them.
Ways that my personality manifests itself in my concerts?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I really like taking questions during a show.
Me too.
I'm a really big fan of that. Keeps things unexpected. You don't know what's going to come down the line. Keeps it new and vibrant and fresh for me. But it also, there's a strategic purpose in it too, because of, I have limited time. I have no interest in going and playing a bar at 2:00 in the morning for $30. But that's not going to do it for me. So I like playing in smaller, I'll take house shows, listening rooms. I'll play at a bar, but only if it's really stacked in my favor. So it's all about creating and establishing relationships. So for me,
because that's one of your personality or your core values in doing all this.
Yep. I'm also extroverted enough I really like meeting people and making friends. And that is a powerful way it's not just a one-way street at that point. You're not just telling people stuff through your songs. You're also asking them questions and then having them answer and then letting them ask you direct questions. So you're getting to know them and inviting them into getting to know you in a more direct fashion, which I definitely think is part of my personality. So I would say that for sure.
I agree. And that was the main thing on my list is that I can tell. I think that's the thing about like whenever you show up in the world as authentically yourself, the people who witness that are able to infer your core values immediately.
Yeah.
Without you even saying any of that, I would know by going to your shows that you really value people and the real connection between people. And I think when when somebody shows up, if this is like musician, visual artist, solopreneur, therapist, whatever, if they show up in the world as not who they really are, or like they're trying to fit into an industry standard that isn't quite them, everyone watching can see that.
Yeah.
They can pick up on it almost instantly.
Definitely.
Before we get back to the conversation, I have just got to tell you about this awesome group of people I am honored to call my patrons. Every time a new song of mine is born, the first recording of it is tenderly revealed to this devoted group. They get to hear all my new material in its raw, fresh, vulnerable state and know that they are helping me do what I do. Because at the end of the day, they just want me to keep doing what I'm doing, and any reminder of that completely floors me every time I think about it. All of this support occurs through a website called patreon.com, which was started by this guy named Jack Conti, whose very attainable mission is to help every creator achieve sustainable income. In a world where artists are seen scrambling for pennies squeezed out of an expiring and broken economic system, the folks at Patreon have brought us back to what all creators used to do. Patronage is not new. But unlike a lot of popular crowdfunding sites out there, Patreon enables creators to receive support on a regular basis. The great thing is that my patrons set their pledges to whatever amount they feel comfortable with, which means patronage fits every budget out there. And of course, you can cancel at any time. If you're a creative type who's interested in joining Patreon yourself, I'd be happy to answer any questions I can. Just shoot me an email anytime. Bottom line, my patrons help me do everything I do, but better and more frequently. If you're interested in becoming a patron of mine, go to barenakedbravery.com/Patreon, Patreon. Let's switch gears here. So you've got an album that just came out and it's super good. Super good. I want you to tell us more about the stories that go behind this album.
Yeah. So I've kind of couched it this way. The concept for the album started with my father's diagnosis of early onset Alzheimer's. So my dad moved out when I was young. And so most of my relationship with him has been over the phone and then really odd, kind of formal get-togethers. So with his diagnosis, as I got older, we went longer and longer without talking, and we were just never really that close. And so with his diagnosis, he's been more eager to share and take on pretty directly his contributions to our estranged relationship. So he's, Alzheimer's is a death sentence. And so he's been pretty upfront with his failures, I guess, the things that he did that he regrets. And he's been eager to tell me things about his growing up that I never knew, which, provide a lot of context into his character and who he is. And that has a direct relative effect on our relationship. And so there's a definite power to that. And I don't know, that really struck me as being brave in the way that he knows it's coming and he's engaged in the process and maintaining these relationships with his kids in so much as he can. And so that really got me thinking about lineage and those, looking at the context of his life and the things that happened to him and why that made him who he is and how he parented me briefly, and then how that affected our relationship, and now how I've parented my son and my daughters. Man, it really shows you the sins of the father there's a thing there that is powerful and devastating and brutal, beautiful. And it's an odd combination, but it's been really impactful for me to think about those things, and specifically, what am I leaving for my kids? What am I giving them that sucks? What am I equipping them with? So I've been thinking a lot about that. So that's kind of the caveat, or excuse me, the catalyst for the album. And the caveat is a song called The Swinging Bell. And it's a song about my wife and how she's really changed the direction of our family. Just the nature of our relationship. We wear my parents' rings, my wife and I. And so there's a redemptive symbolism there that's not lost on me. And that was very intentional, actually. I don't know. There's those two things, that bravery in accepting defeat and standing up against it at the same time, and then also like with an eye on the future. It's kind of all rolled in together, bravery and the bell, and then also the starting of our record, or I keep wanting to say record label, but it really is more of a music collective. We call it Lineage Artistry. And so it's all that same sort of thinking about legacy. What are you leaving behind you?
I've noticed, in the last, maybe this is like what it means to turn 30, but in the last like 4 or 5 years, that concept of lineage and legacy is like, I've got it right here. It's on a Post-it note. I've got the word legacy and then an arrow going most important thing.
Yeah.
Because I think when we get caught up in the crazy stuff of our career, like the busy work of the career, it's really easy to lose sight of that most important thing, like that one thing that's really all that matters, So I am proud to know you, sir, because you're out there doing it as well. And it's really good to see that. So let's pull a little bit back into like doing things differently. How do you see, because there's usually like a standard for this is how you release an album. Mm-hmm. How do you see your album release or your product launch being different from other product launches?
Well,
sorry, that's a really hard question. I just realized I might not be able to answer that for my own stuff.
It's a great question. I think with this one, unfortunately, it's a little bit tempered by the scope of budget.
Mm-hmm. But that's a reality. Like that's part of that thing that's like, you have to let your business fit you, not the other way around. And I think a lot of artists, this has been me in the past, try to bite off more than we can chew, and especially financially, and it ends up biting us in the butt and we can't.
Right. Yeah. Well, there's a definite strategy as far as like doing the most that I can to create a buzz, to the people that supported the record, that helped finance the record, trying to keep talking about it, engaging them with it, letting them see the themes, letting them hear it piece by piece so you don't let it all go at one time. Mm-hmm. Trying to create that viral effect, creating good content around the recording, good artwork, good merchandise, good video content, that sort of thing. Because of the scope of the release is limited by budget, trying to do as much as you can with a sense of virality to get that buzz organically as much as you can. Mm-hmm. I was listening to an interesting article on NPR. They were talking about the difference between quality of content versus the depth and breadth of exposure, and how the latter is often more impactful than the former. Because you can have the greatest song in the world, but if no one ever hears it, what does it matter? Mm-hmm. That idea of how do I get more exposure to this product that I've created, to this artwork? So I really wish I had an incredible 15-step plan for that was bulletproof as far as the release of a record goes. But
well, I mean, that's kind of hard to do, especially with how quickly any industry changes.
absolutely.
So I'm sorry to say this. I don't think you're going to get that, but,
Yep.
but I think, you can still have some really great starting points. Maybe it's not like the first do this, then open this window and then do this, but you can at least go into, I mean, you've already got the first step, which is how do I maximize the dollar and aim it at a bigger audience?
Right. Yep.
So that's one.
There you go.
When we are dealing with the constraints of our finances as creative go-getters, what are some things that you guys do as just go-to habits for making sure that the ends do meet? I mean, you already mentioned a couple. You have made lifestyle choices that allow you the freedom to do the artistic things you want to do. But is there something else that you guys do on a regular basis that empowers the finances?
Yes. One of the things we've tried to do is be real, I guess. I was looking for another way to say that. But there's always this tension, and I'd be interested to hear if you feel this tension too. But for me, there's always been this tension between, okay, I've got a buddy who was on One Tree Hill, and he's really, really talented.
Was he an actor or musician for One Tree Hill? Wait, both?
Both.
Okay, cool.
And so when he got the spot, his career took off. So there's that content thing versus distribution. The content's there. If the person is really good, they're really good. But once people discover that they're really good, it's almost like that. It's that whole adage of, I worked really hard for 15 years for my overnight success. Because at some point it just clicks and you get the break and that's it. The rest is history. Mm-hmm. There's always this tension of trying to be or maintain this level of I've made it so that you can be legitimate, because people treat you differently when they think you're legitimate.
Isn't that frustrating?
Yes, especially when one of your biggest values is authenticity in real relationships.
Oh my gosh.
And I find myself in this tension, this terrible tension of postulating versus like being real. So I've really had to make a point of fighting that and being real, so that when something comes up and there's a new opportunity and crap, I cannot afford it, what do I do? Well, then you let people come alongside you in these relationships that you've built, and you just make them aware of the opportunity that you have where you do not have the means to obtain it on your own. And if someone is able to come alongside you and bless you in an incredible way, then awesome. And if not, then you're no worse than you were before. You didn't have the means to do it anyways.
But I mean, it's basically asking for help.
Yeah.
But it's not, it's like asking for help without asking.
It's making it clear you need help.
Right.
It's not even so much asking for help, although there have been times where I've asked someone specifically for help because I didn't want to put it out that I needed help.
Yeah.
And those have worked out too. But I don't know, it's just kind of a weird situation. I have a great guitar and it works really well, but it was having a lot of tuning problems. And when I broke a string, which is often, unfortunately, I would, kind of put things on hold. And in the middle of a show, it can be a little bit of a train wreck. And all of a sudden I get this check in the mail from a friend who says, hey, about 6 months ago, I felt like I was supposed to send you $1,000. And so I put it off. I forgot about it. I didn't do it. Well, now I really feel like I'm supposed to send you $1,500. So I'm going to do it now before it turns into $2,000. So I went out and I found this incredible guitar, and I bought a second guitar. Now that's become my primary guitar. And so now that's not something I have to worry about. I have
Mm-hmm.
two guitars that work really well and that sound really great. And, I don't need anything fancier. And that was an incredible blessing. And I didn't have $1,500 sitting around where I could buy a guitar. So, just little things like that happen more often than not when you are being authentic and real and open about what it is you need. And when you see someone else who is also being open about what they need, rallying to them and helping them, oftentimes with no recompense, for lack of a better term, you get what you put out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really believe powerfully in that. And I'm tempted constantly not to. But when I'm true to that, things work out pretty well.
That's great. I have nothing else to say about that. I think I fully stand by that. I think that's a really great motto, especially because as business owners in America, we have to have this. It's true. We have to look like we have our stuff together, even though sometimes we don't. And that element of realness is rare.
Yeah.
And that rareness automatically increases your value, which is ironic sometimes.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so I don't do this with everyone, but I feel like you can dish it out. I gave you some tough questions. Do you have a tough question to throw back at me?
I feel like I always have questions for you.
Okay.
It's funny because all the things you said about me, I think about you. You practice your craft and your career in such a unique and different way. It's always really thought-provoking to me and fascinating. And I always want to pick your brain about a million things. Let me see if I can think of one.
You're welcome to do that anytime. And thank you. It's really hard. I do the same. Like, I have to make an exerted intentional effort to do something differently. And I have to check in with myself a lot. That's been a really good habit that I've built of wait, how do I really feel about this thing that I'm about ready to pull the trigger on?
Right. Let's put it this way. If there were no constraints,
mm-hmm.
What would your career look like in 2 years?
Oh my gosh, this is such a good question. And I need to answer this. I know I need to answer this. And I might not have the full and complete answer right this second, but what I really want to do is I want to give, for lack of a better phrase or descriptor of this, I would really love to give musical TED Talks about bravery to women's prisons or men's prisons or women's creative entrepreneur groups or churches but I really see that the groups of people experiencing a musical TED Talk, like a cohesive performance, where they don't just walk away with having heard some really great songs, but they also get to walk away with some more tangible empowerment.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that would play out or look on a day-to-day basis, but I do see that is something that our culture needs. We need more bravery, and that looks very different. And my definition of bravery is not what everyone defines as bravery. And so I would like to redefine bravery. Oh my gosh, I said it.
That's awesome.
Wow. Yeah. So thank you for asking me.
You're welcome. That's cool. I love that. You'd be really good at that too.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So one last final question before my brain goes off into a bajillion places. What is it that we can do in our own lives to empower this sense of, so your album is called The Bravery in Bell.
Mm-hmm.
What is one way that we can do that we can pull your album into our lives other than listening and purchasing it, which is something that I highly recommend for everyone to do? Yeah. How can they more fully, beyond just listening to the album and purchasing it, how can we fully digest your album?
Oh, that is a great question. Because it comes about from such a personal place.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. For me, it really is. This album is so much about being and finding a realness with who you are and owning things. So is that there's that sense of, kind of taking responsibility for your poor decisions and owning them. And there's a lament that goes along with that. But there's also like a courage and an ownership and a hopefulness moving forward in that. Because one of the values that I really have is there's a lot of crap that's always going around. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of, and it changes from time to time, from culture to culture, from circumstance to circumstance. There's always something. It's easy for us to lose sight of the joy, of the goodness, of the hopefulness of anything around us. That it's really always been a challenge for me to put out art that isn't focused on hope or the pursuit of something better. And so this album is very much the pursuit of something better. It's more about the bell than it is about bravery. And yeah, I feel like if I were to answer the question, this is a really long-winded answer, forgive me. I would say I hope that people can take a moment and listen to who they are, to what they really want, to what's around them that matters to them, and then pursue it with passion, pursue it with love, pursue it with hope, and own those things, and then not be afraid for what comes next. And there's a risk and a gamble that goes along with that, but I truly believe that it's something that impacts people for the better.
I think it will. I know it will. I know it will because anytime we do that for ourselves, that resonates with other people.
Right.
And then that spreads and multiplies in an exponential kind of way. And I know it will.
Yeah.
So there you have it.
Nice.
Bradford, thank you for taking the time to do this today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Of course. You've got awesome stuff to put out there. I can't wait to see what else is coming out too.
Well, thank you.
So that's our show this week. Thank you for listening. You can keep in touch with Bradford Loomis and check out his new album by visiting the show notes for this episode at barenakedbravery.com. I know you'll really love everything he's putting out into the world, especially if you enjoyed this conversation. If you enjoyed listening to this conversation as much as we enjoyed making it for you, then please give the show a review and rating on the iTunes desktop app or on your podcast app on your phone. It really does help us out. But if you don't want to do that, you can share this episode with a friend, especially if you are a creative entrepreneur or you know of one. I can guarantee you they will appreciate this conversation because we all need some of this like heart-to-heart stuff from time to time. And you are a part of spreading all of that bravery and the heart-to-heart stuff as much as I and Bradford are. So thank you ahead of time for doing that. If you are digging the music in today's episode, that is because it's brought to you by my friends at Music Box Licensing, a premier creative music agency dedicated to finding and crafting unique soundtracks. To find out more about all the artists, musicians, and other sponsors of the show, please visit barenakedbravery.com/sponsors. I'm really looking forward to being with you next week. We have some awesome things in store. Until then, though, I have one message for you. It is this. Be yourself, be vulnerable, be brave, because the world needs more of your bare naked bravery.